Welcome. Today we have Matt Dixon, who is an Executive Director of Strategic Research at CEB and one of the authors of The Effortless Experience, a book that will really change the way you think about customer loyalty. Matt holds a PhD in political economy from the University of Pittsburgh and is a senior member of CEB's global research team. He's overseen dozens of original quantitative and qualitative research studies on all aspects of customer service strategy and sales productivity. So we're really happy to have Matt here, and I just got through with this book, and it's wonderful. How are you today, Matt?
I'm doing well, Adam. How are you?
Doing great, and I just got to tell you, I love this book. So why don't you tell me a little bit about CEB and the work you do?
Sure. CEB is a member advisory company. And what we do, the best way to think about us is as sort of a collection of research-based networks. So if you name a box on a typical company's organizational chart, the head of HR, the chief information officer, the chief marketing officer, the head of sales, head of R&D, the general counsel, and of course, as we'll be talking about today, the head of customer experience or the head of customer service. We build research programs to serve those executives and their teams. And our value proposition is really to help those teams, help those executives look around corners, see what's coming next in their functional area, to give their teams data, best practices, tools, templates, resources to get kind of better, faster, cheaper to right answer, around any change they might be driving within their functional area. And the research we'll be talking about today comes specifically out of our program, the Customer Contact Leadership Council, which is a program that serves roughly 400 heads of customer contact and customer experience around the world.
Yeah, and one thing I enjoyed about the book was how data heavy it was, and I'm going to go ahead and show your book here. I'm not sure if you can see.
I can't see it. Hopefully it's the right book.
Excellent. It is. It's The Effortless Experience. And
hopefully it's not Mad Magazine that you're holding up.
Exactly. One of the things I liked about this is a lot of the takeaways from this book fly in the face of conventional customer service advice. So what inspired you to take on the topic of customer effort and its relationship to loyalty?
So just to pick up there, looking for basically the background on the book, is that right?
Yeah, to really sort of understand, what made you go into customer effort and loyalty in that intersection.
Yeah, we, as a member-based organization, we take our research marching orders from heads of those functional areas that we serve, in this case, customer service. And this is going back about 2007 or so when we started this work at them. And the question that was on our members' minds, the question that they brought back to us as a research team, was sort of this idea of how can we use customer service to really differentiate our company in the eyes of our customers, to create preference. Really it was a time at which I think a lot of heads of customer service were under a great deal of pressure from their CEOs, from their CFOs, et cetera. A world in which customers increasingly seeing brands and products and value propositions as very commoditized, one company to the next. And our members, heads of customer service, are coming back to us saying, hey, CEO is looking at me saying, well, how do we create a differentiated service experience? Maybe we can be known for delivering a different in kind service experience, a superlative service experience. And that's the point of differentiation for our brand in the market. And when we started to unpack this, what we found was a lot of conventional wisdom that really kind of permeated this area. And really, put very simply, the conventional wisdom out there is that in order to create to deliver a customer service experience, we're talking about when a customer has a problem and they need the company's help to resolve that problem. In order to create a customer service experience that delivers a positive loyalty impact that's seen as differentiated in the eyes of a customer, you've really got to go above and beyond what the customer normally expects. And you pick up any book or any article on customer service, and most of it is geared towards that conventional wisdom that we've got to wow the customer, we've got to delight the customer in customer service. And when we do that, boy, the loyalty returns can be really powerful for our company. And that was really the starting point for this. We were heading into this research not asking whether or not that was the right thing to do, but rather trying to figure out, well, what's the best way to do it? Because there are lots of things a company could do to wow the customer, to delight the customer in the service interaction. Which of those investments make good sense and which ones don't make good sense for a company? Which ones will deliver the highest return? And as we'll get to in a moment, I think as we got into it, we realized that there are much more fundamental questions about whether delighting customers in service interactions makes sense at all. that we started to uncover. And it was as big a surprise to us as it's been to our members over these several years we've been delivering this research.
Yeah, and that, you ask a great question at the beginning of the book, which I loved, and I never really thought of it this way, which is, and I'm paraphrasing here, but
Yep.
what companies do you continue to do business with because of the great or above and beyond experience you receive? And what companies do you no longer do business with because of the bad experiences you've had?
Yeah.
And as you sort of predict in the book, for me personally, I found that latter question much easier to answer.
That's right.
So why do you think the bad experiences have more resonance than those
Yeah.
above and beyond wow, delight moments?
It's such a good question. We as we dig into that, and I ask that question of many audiences as I'm out on the road presenting this research, and it's interesting, Adam. Just like you said, I think we can all think of one or two companies that we're really loyal to because of the fantastic service they provide. Perhaps it's the restaurant that you and your spouse frequent, where they know your drink order and they know your names and your kids' names and things like that. Or maybe it's a really special vacation spot that you have great family memories from, and they really went above and beyond. But the flip side is usually people kind of scratch their heads a little bit and coming up with a list of companies who would fit those criteria. The much easier list, just as you said, is those companies you stop doing business with because of the awful service they provide. Now, when you ask people that, man, the list is really long. In fact, you've got to get people to stop, to shut up at some point, because it's the cable company, it's the dry cleaners that ruined your shirt, it's the it's the delivery company that that didn't deliver a holiday gift on time, even though they said they were going to. Whatever it is, that list of suppliers we stopped doing business with because of bad experiences is quite extensive, and I think a lot of it comes down to this phenomenon that we uncovered in our research, which is, for the most part, service interactions tend to drive disloyalty, not positive loyalty. And it goes back to the conventional wisdom out there that, companies tend to think, hey, if we wow the customer will be more loyal to us. What we actually found was those customers who were delighted or wowed in the service interaction were actually no more loyal than those customers whose expectations were simply met, when the company just delivered on the basics. The companies really way overestimate the value of going above and beyond. But it's not only that. It turns out that customer service is mostly a game of defense, not offense. That in the grand scheme of things, there are very limited opportunities for a customer service organization to drive positive loyalty at all. In fact, most of what customer service does is drive disloyalty because of how badly it's delivered around, across industry around the world with all the companies we do business with. So that's why those lists are very numerous in the number of companies that really disappoint us. But most companies tend to think of loyalty as just the positive side. What can we do to drive positive loyalty, make our customers more loyal to us? But the problem is they're really ignoring all the things we do to drive disloyalty with our customers. And so many of those have to do with customer service. And those experiences are very, very powerful for customers. They're resonant, as you said. They're ones that customers can easily recall. And not only that, but the word of mouth effect is enormous. When a customer has a positive service experience, they actually tell relatively few people. But when they have a negative service experience, they tell the entire world. And of course, we know that Twitter and Facebook and these social platforms make that much, much easier for customers to do these days.
Right, and that's what's interesting. And our readership at Customers at Stick ranges from CX professionals to sort of frontline people. So I want to clarify one of the things you said, which was basically the very act of having a customer service interaction, meaning something did not go as it was expected and you've had to address it. If you wow them, you delight them, it doesn't matter. The very fact of having that interaction is a negative.
Yeah, it's it is a bit of an unfair thing. It's like, to use a football metaphor, I guess, it's like being consistently pin deep in your own territory. And that's kind of what it feels like for a customer service professional or a frontline customer service manager or support professional, is really that, it's an unfair place because your customers are calling you with a problem. Now, the interesting thing about that is, a huge percentage of the time, even if it's a product problem, they tend to ascribe the negative value or the negative experience to customer service. All of a sudden, the ownership of that problem goes from the product side of the business to the customer service side of the business. And customer service does things to perpetuate that. So think of it this way: we're starting in a bad place already, and then the things we do in customer service just make things worse. So it's and we go into this in the book. There are many drivers of disloyalty. Things like having to call the company repeatedly, going to the website and not finding what you need there, and then having to bail out and pick up the phone, getting transferred, which, as we all know, as customers, feels like passing the buck by the company, being treated in a generic way, and just generally the hassle factor that companies sort of impart on their customers. All of these things just perpetuate this negative interaction. But yeah, you're right. Any customer service interaction is 4 times more likely to drive disloyalty than positive loyalty. It doesn't mean positive loyalty doesn't happen sometimes. It does. But really, positive loyalty is the job of product. It's the job of the brand guys. It's the job of that part of the business. And the job of customer service is plugging the hole in the bottom of the loyalty bucket and dealing with the disloyalty. And then the natural disloyalty effect that happens when people have problems with our products and services and not giving them a reason to be more frustrated when they get off the phone with us.
Gotcha. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to have to go change my business cards to say marketing. But one thing I like, you just sort of touched on them. In the book, you talk about the sort of 5 things that cause disloyalty, and 4 of them are based on effort, which you just touched on. And one of them you mentioned was generic service.
Yeah, right.
Sort of define that for us and what that means.
Yeah, it's, in layperson's terms, Adam, I'd call it being treated or feeling like you're being treated like a number, not like a person. And I think that's probably the simplest explanation. Now, interestingly, we would argue that even that 5th one, if you will, or that 5th driver is still a source of effort. When we unpacked customer effort, what we found is, companies very quickly get this concept of, okay, what you're telling me is, there's not a lot of benefit to delighting the customer in the service interaction. That there's diminishing returns to throwing money at giveaways and refunds and things that are intended to wow or delight the customer. Got it. And then you're telling me customer service tends to drive disloyalty. So if I put these things together, and the things that drive disloyalty are the things we force customers to endure, sources of effort like callbacks and repeating information and transfers and channel switching and these sorts of things. And when I put all those things together, the punchline is, instead of trying to drive positive loyalty by delighting customers, instead customer service should try to mitigate disloyalty by making the service interaction easy, by reducing customer effort. Now, when we peel apart, okay, how do you do that? Most companies tend to think of, okay, making things easy, reducing customer effort, that comes down to process changes and, going from, let's say, a tiered support desk model to a universal agent model. Have one person who picks up the phone and can, with the right tools and the right knowledge base, can actually answer any customer issue, or in-depth policy overhauls and things like that. And there is sort of food for many winters in terms of fixing that stuff. But it turns out a huge source of effort has nothing to do with what the customer actually has to do. It has much more to do with how the customer feels about that interaction, their perception of effort. And a lot of this comes down to, and the reason companies actually struggle with this is they look at the process and the systems fixes first. They spend a lot of money on these things. It's like the Six Sigmaization, if you will, of customer service. And they ignore the people side of things, the actual interaction between their reps and their customers. It turns out that 2/3 of customer effort is actually a function of how customers feel versus what they have to do. And when you look at the feel side, a lot of it is made worse by treating customers in a generic fashion. And in fact, companies who really get this right teach their reps to tailor the service interaction to the customer, to use language in a purposeful way, not just being nice to the customer, saying their name 3 times and thanking them for being loyal, which ironically comes across as very generic to the customer, even though we're doing this from out of goodwill and it comes from the right place, but it comes across as very generic. But instead, trying to teach reps to actually identify, if from the very get-go, what kind of customer am I dealing with? What kind of situation are they in? What's their state of mind? And how do I tailor my resolution to what they need right now, into their context right now, instead of just trying to follow a prescribed generic checklist that the company's handed down to me. And we find companies who have really liberated their reps and given them the tools and the techniques to do this, deliver much better outcomes and are much more able to manage the feel or the perceptual side of effort. So even that last driver you mentioned that didn't really in our analysis fall into the customer effort side, we find generic service actually to be a big driver of customer effort. And I think you can easily tie that into the overall effort reduction concept.
Well, right. And what's interesting is so much what you're talking about is, you talk about it in the book, is empowering them, obviously, to
Right.
handle the situation. But you actually take that a step further, because we all know the sort of dreaded metric, first contact resolution.
Right.
And, you talk about that empowerment and that proactive and actually, forgive me, thinking, instead of just doing a checkbox, and taking that a step further and going into focusing on next issue resolution,
Right.
trying to anticipate the downstream challenges and issues and
Yeah.
heading them off. So talk a little bit about that, please.
It's a great point. My colleague, my co-author Rick DeLisi, we had a very interesting conversation the other day, and he said, when you think about the first contact resolution metric, and you think about how it comes across as a customer, this is the customer on the phone with a service rep, and the service rep says, have I fully resolved your issue today? Which I think as companies, we might think is great. We don't want to let the customer go before we check to make sure we've fully resolved the thing they called about. And but from the customer perspective, it comes across as, okay, you're just trying to check a box and get me off the phone so you can get on to your next call and stop dealing with me. But the irony is when we look at first contact resolution, and you actually kind of lift up a level, not to ask why do we fail at first contact resolution, but rather, why do customers have to call back, which is a little bit of a different question. And when you look at that, what you find is that a huge chunk of the time customers call back because of things that don't have anything to do actually with whether we solved their issue on the first call or not. They call back because of issues related to that first call, but things they didn't really fully realize until they hung up the phone. Knock-on issues and follow-up issues, or what we call adjacent issues. And to your point before about next issue avoidance, what we find is best companies have moved beyond simply focusing on, are we solving this issue for the customer, now to start thinking about, what's the context within which this issue has happened for the customer? And when I solve this issue, what is the thing the customer might call back about? So solving this issue A, might lead to issues B, C, and D, which naturally stem from that first issue. And, we as a company obviously know that because we have the data and we have the experience. The customer wouldn't know that because they don't know this stuff as well as we do. So how do we become more customer-centric? And forgive the expression, it's a bit overused, but really to be more customer-centric in thinking about the customer's context and not giving them a reason to have to call us back. And so we're finding best companies are actually teaching their reps to not just solve the current issue, but to actually proactively resolve the next issue the customer might call back about, getting to much lower callback volume and much happier and satisfied, if you will, customers in the end.
Well, it seems like that would actually be in one of all the CX sort of initiatives you can do. There's a lot of sort of detached downstream ROI, but it
Right.
seems like that one should be an easy sell in the C-suite because it's immediate return.
Absolutely. It's, one of the questions we often get about that is if we take a little bit more time on this call to forward resolve or resolve the next issue, to forward resolve the next call, aren't we going to be extending the call length? And, heads of customer service are very, very nervous about that kind of thing. But what we find is those companies who've done this, it will take a little bit more time to forward resolve the next call. But when you add up the cost of doing two separate calls, right? When the customer gets off the phone, they have to call you back a second time. So doing one 4-minute call or 4.5-minute call versus two separate 3-minute calls, the cost savings is sort of a no-brainer. And not only that, but you got to think about the disloyalty effect. Remember we talked about before, those customers who have to call back are more disloyal than those customers who don't. It's a huge driver of customer effort. So proactively taking ownership, thinking ahead, solving for that customer's issue is not just a cost savings, but as we like to say, it's a cost savings that customers actually want. It's cheaper for you, and it's actually they feel a sense of ownership from the company that they're really, they're helping me think ahead, and they're conscious of the fact that my time is not here to be used willy-nilly, but they're being good stewards of my time as a customer and not looking to waste my time down the road.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're going to wrap all this up into the idea of your customer effort score, which sort of embraces the idea of the customer effort. So just tell us a little bit about that score, maybe how it relates to other metrics that are out there.
Yeah. Sure. We've gone through a couple of iterations, Adam, on the customer effort score. Some people might remember the article we wrote in 2010, which kind of kicked a lot of this research off, or sort of our first public unveiling of this in a Harvard Business Review, an article called "Stop Trying to Delight Your Customers." And in that article, we released our first version of the customer effort score. And we've since been collecting a lot of data around the world. We had some problems with the original question that it's hard to translate into multiple languages. It was not an intuitive kind of scale scale, things like that we've kind of tightened the bolts on it and come up with, we think, a really great articulation that's tested really, really well relative to other metrics like CSAT or Net Promoter Score. And really, it's an ease-based question. It's a question of trying to understand how easy did the company make it for you to get this issue resolved. And it's on a standard scale that most of us use in our post-interaction surveys. And we like it for a few reasons. We like it because it's a great way to start identifying where is effort coming from in the customer experience. Now, one of the things we'd be really careful of saying or suggesting is that it's a silver bullet, because it's not. And there is no such thing in customer experience. And any of your listeners or followers would, I'm sure, know that. They would say the same thing about CSAT or NPS or any other customer experience metric. So again, customer effort score, not a silver bullet. If you're going to really get this right, this mission of making the service interaction easy, you got to ask lots of questions. You got to collect lots of data. But this is a great starting point because it allows you to pinpoint what's the level of effort by channel, by product line, by different issue type, by different customer type in different geographies. And then as we collect more data, we can start to get into, and where are those sources of effort cropping up, and how do we actually eliminate them so we can create kind of triage. What are the things we're doing in the customer interaction that are causing the most effort for our customers, and how do we get rid of those? It's a great metric. It's also great for another purpose, a very practical reason, which is the linkage between likely defection or high levels of disloyalty between customers who score on the very bad end of that effort question, the customer effort score, who say they had to put forth a lot of effort to get their issue resolved. The company really didn't make it easy for me. The disloyalty behaviors of those folks are significant. So very unlikely to repurchase, very unlikely to spend more with you, and very, very likely to spread negative word of mouth to anybody and everybody who will listen. So we call it a little bit of a defection divining rod. So if you're asking this customer effort score at the end of your interactions with customers, if for no other reason, do it just because it'll give you a sense of who are the people who are likely to get off the phone and then drop you. And you're going to end up on that list that we talked about at the beginning of this call, the list of the companies that customers stop doing business with because of the horrible service they provide. If you could find that out right away and then engage the customer to find out, hey, what could we have done better? Let me try to make this right for you. You're doing your company a great service and the customer a great service, avoiding that defection and plugging the hole in the bottom of that loyalty bucket.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's Matt Dixon of the Effortless Experience, and definitely check it out. This book is awesome. A lot of data, a lot of research, and we really appreciate your time here today.
Thank you, Adam.